This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to Confronting the Line. And as most of you know, the main thesis of our show is to explore the boundary between help and harm. In the personal development field, we want to examine where transformation, change, growth can actually be used in ways that are exploitive and that often in conflict with what many of us who participate think we're participating in.
Yeah.
So that's what we're exploring. We want to come to the line and find that line, first of all, so that we can then see how to better protect ourselves, but also how to make the industry better, how to make our groups, our spiritual groups, our wellness groups, our personal development groups better. We're here because we love those evolving the human spirit and wellness, right? So anyway, I'm really excited today to have with me Ken Wortley, who is a teacher, a former pastor, and an author of the book, The Gospel of Secrets. It's a memoir in which Ken shares his deeply personal chronicle detailing his journey from a life of pretense to one of authenticity. The book outlines his struggle with suppressed homosexuality identity while serving for 2 decades as a pastor, a career he chose out of having grown up in a conservative evangelical environment. Key chapters trace his path through a mask of marriage, the painful shattered silence of his divorce, his subsequent path of therapy and unlearning, and the ultimate discovery of love with his partner in Brazil, where he has found acceptance and peace and not having to live in the shadows and secrets. I was really excited when Ken reached out to me because for those of that read my book, in the beginning starts with sort of my first getting kicked out of a group was when a church kicked me out for being a teen parent. Well, a little bit, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but they told me I could participate. I just had to hide that I was a parent, and which is a really weird thing. So for me, I left and didn't go back rather than try to stay there. But that's a challenging path when we feel rejected by the community that we found such home in. And it's confusing. It's really confusing. So I was really excited. I had a very personal connection to Ken's story and have enjoyed reading his book. So Ken, welcome to Confronting the Line.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, and good to meet you, Anne. Very good to meet you. And if I break into Portuguese and start to call you Ana, excuse me, but I have to.
I will answer to Ana. The only one I don't answer to is Annie.
Annie, Ana. Ana sounds good. Well, thank you for having me. I would say, may the words that we speak bring encouragement and peace to other people that are listening for us, today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's why, sometimes people accuse me of speaking up because I have some vendetta, or in the words of the group that I was very much part of and a teacher in, I'm incomplete, or I have some sort of, upset that's unresolved. Quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
And, but as I've embarked on a journey of discovery, deconstruction, and healing, and in my case, a lot of the abuse I talk about from time to time didn't happen to me, but I've had hundreds of other participants, teachers, staff members come forward and tell me their experiences in the personal development space. When we experience something like that and we come through it, we want to share.
Right.
And we want to tell others,
Exactly.
and others who might be suffering. But for me, I also have a passion for the thing that got us into these kinds of groups in the first place, which is I always just wanted to make a difference in my community. I wanted to leave the world just a little bit better for my children and grandchildren.
Exactly. Yes.
I want to, like our growth as human beings and as a species is just something I've been into since I was a girl. And
we want our lives to make a difference.
We do. We do. Some of us do. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We'll put that on everybody, but for sure it's fine.
Yes.
So I took some time and I prepared a bunch of kind of questions, but I'm going to kind of let our conversation go where it goes. But I think we should start a little bit with the questions and walk a little bit through your story, which is one many of us have heard about, not yours in particular, but I think as we've evolved in the last 30, 40, 50 years, we've come to understand that being gay is not a choice. that it's
Yes.
not something that I choose just because it's more fun or
Right.
it's sexy or whatever. No, it's
Right.
an aspect of who we are as human
Right.
beings.
Exactly.
And a good friend of mine teaches a really great course called Upgrading Your Gender IQ.
Oh,
And, the whole gender conversations that are
right.
happening. But what we're finding out is our kind of simplistic way of relating to our sex,
Right.
boy, girl, which has to do with our sexual organs. In genders gotten overlapped on that, but they're not necessarily the same thing. And now
Right.
I've lost track now. There's like 60 some in the United States, different
Oh,
kind of terminologies for different
oh,
expressions of
oh,
gender. And there's so much variation in the world of human being that, and for sure in the church, I always felt, what we were teaching was what I was learning as a girl was to love people exactly how they are. And so, anyways, your story is such
but that's a challenge for the church to love people, but we want to be comfortable in the way that we love. We don't want people to be different than us. I think you've touched on something very important about that being gay is not a choice. But somehow, church people in particular are doing gymnastics about that kind of thinking. Is it really a choice? A good friend of mine, a good sociologist, told me, it's okay to be gay as long as you don't act on it. Well, hello, what does that mean? Just be single for the rest of your life. It's okay. You are welcome in our church, but you must remain like us, Adam and Eve, the rest of the couples in the
uh
congregation. What they're saying is be single and be lonely, don't be yourself.
well, don't have a family, all of this stuff. Yeah, I think for me, I kind of see it all as a massive failure to evolve our thinking,
Yes.
to evolve our understanding. But that's one of the things I want to talk with you about today. What do we think underlies that resistance to, there's and as I was reading through your book and reading through some of the questions I prepared today, I was very struck by this need. I refer to groups, the group I was in, which is a personal development, group, pretty big one, or was pretty big. It's shrinking rapidly, but there's many like it. It's not alone, and in an interesting way, I think it was in part, it rose to popularity in part as people did get disgruntled with the church groups, which was our primary community structure for many thousand years. But,
Right.
I'll just look over the last couple hundred years in the United States, where you and I are both from. But I mean, the United States has found that it's religious groups that were not fleeing persecution for they wanted to be more liberal. They actually were fleeing, they wanted to be more
Yeah.
rigorous. So we come from a very, very, very Puritan culture here in the United
Exactly.
States.
Exactly.
And I think what we're seeing now is the shaking off of that, but it's fighting back a bit.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I think the church, and I keep talking about the church or church
Sure.
people, but that's kind of my experience. It's difficult. It's difficult to do the theology. I learned that I had to unlearn and reconstruct my theology. That takes a lot of work. It does
Yeah.
take a lot of work. In the beginning, I threw off my faith. I just stuffed it. I was just tired of talking about God. I knew God didn't make me. I knew God didn't love me. So just forget it. I spent a good 6 to 8 months trying to find a church in which I felt comfortable with, but the music was good, the community was great, but then all of a sudden the message or the eulogy would be, or the sermon would be more of, well, Adam and Eve and the family. And, at first was difficult because there was Joseph and Mary, and there wasn't Steve and Ken. It was
Right.
just, it was hard. So I thought, oh, I'm not going to go back to that church. And I didn't like the guy's attitude. I did end up in a Lutheran church, and I remember on Christmas Eve the pastor coming before the service started, and I was kind of weeping, thinking how lonely I was. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "It'll get better." I just want you to know it'll get better. And I went, how do you know that?
How do you know that?
It's going to get better. What do you mean it's going to get better? I think he read my tears and kind of thought, okay, this guy's going through a lot and it will get better maybe in February or something. But back to religious people, clergy in particular, it's a hard road to redo your theology or to reconstruct your theology or to dig deeper into scripture. It's easy to sit in the pew and to have 5 or 6 of those key verses that talk about abominations and sin and homosexuality and all of that theology
Yeah.
that just hardens our heart. We say we're loving people, but it hardens our heart on a kind of a shell that goes around our heart.
Yeah, really. And as I've deconstructed what a high control group, cultic, that's the sort of catch-all word. It's not really a very good word. If you actually look up cult, we're in cults all over the place.
Yeah.
That we're a social species. And, so it's not so much about cult or not cult, it's about destructive
Right.
group or not. Is it harmful to its members? Is the balance of help and harm out of balance? Is the balance of the goodies, the yummies, the whatever it is the
Right.
money, the fame, the
Yeah.
security, the da da da, is it balanced towards the leadership or the source or owner, or is it balanced towards and shared equally amongst its
Yeah.
members? And most of these groups sort of hide out behind a veneer. So let's kind of get into some of the questions that my
Okay.
AI buddy and I came up with were really good. I was like, actually, I was
Okay.
like, "Oh, I want to know about some of these."
Yeah.
So the first thing it kind of brought up is, so you lived a life defined by what was hidden. So just for our audience, we'll encourage them to read the book, of course, to get the full story. But how many years did you live in secret, as it were? Like kind of knowing that the way I read your book, there's 2 phases. There's kind of knowing there's something different about me, and then there's knowing like, no, I'm gay, but I'm hiding, right? So there's kind of those 2
Yeah.
phases. But overall, how many years would you say you lived in
Yeah.
that hidden
Yeah.
environment?
Well,
With hidden.
first of all, I grew up in a very religious family in Michigan, and everything was just middle class. Everything was together. As a male, you went to school and you had girlfriends and you played sports, basketball and football, and you did track and you did all of those activities. But on the most important thread through my life was the church. When the church was open, my mom and dad were there. My dad
Mm,
was a deacon. My mom was the circle, or whatever they call that, mission circles of women that gathered with tea and would
yes.
gather
What
together.
what denomination?
American Baptist,
American Baptist.
which is kind of a oxymoron, because I usually say it's a liberal Baptist, and people say, "What? What's a liberal Baptist?" It's more of the open of the Baptists.
Hey, I'm sitting in Texas, and I've had a
Eh,
lot of interaction and run-in with the Southern Baptist.
Yeah, Southern Baptist and American Baptist. American Baptist split with the Southern Baptist over the slavery issue. So
Oh,
that's the history. So my life was just pounded in. I shouldn't say pounded, but was invited to be a straight young male playing sports, trying to get a girlfriend. I had a lot of girl friends, but never romantic. Never. Somebody asked me the other day, well, when did you know you were gay? And I never entertained that question all of my life.
that would be a
Um,
dangerous question
yeah,
to enter.
it's a dangerous question for me. I knew there was no possibility of someone being gay because religion wouldn't allow me to do that. The church wouldn't allow me to do that. So I was very active in the church, involved with a lot of leadership roles and a lot of camping and a lot of times with the pastors that would come and go, evangelists that would come to the church, all the time struggling with personal sexual issues that were easily confessed and guilt ridden and dealt with. And then back on the straight road to becoming what my mom and dad and my extended family really wanted, is a pastor, to become a pastor,
Kidding.
to to become an effective pastor. So I went in the late teens, never had a girlfriend, never went out on dates, went to the senior prom, of course, with the girl. I was very polite. I opened the door for her. I never kissed her because I didn't know that. Yeah, that was too
Yeah.
uncomfortable for me. When did I know I was gay? That's the key question. All this time I'm going, no, 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 no. I don't want to entertain that. I don't want to
Right.
even think about that. I think I have a good friend. His name is Ray Boltz. And Ray is a famous Christian singer, but he wrote a song, God Knows I Tried. And he writes these words: when they said I was a sinner, I was struggling with my youth, and with the hope that God could change me. I believe it was the truth. I spent my whole life to be what they said I should. That's that whole cultic kind of thing. You should
Yeah.
be like this. On the inside, I was dying because I never really could. God knows I tried. God knows all the pain I kept inside, and He knows all the tears I shed at night. I was so good at pretending, just like an actor on the stage. In the end, no one really knew me, only the roles that I played. I love that song. I love that song.
That's a beautiful. I see so many correlations, Ken, to the personal development world, which I can see plainly in my own story. You know, I grew up non-denominational, kind of praise Christian churches.
Right.
We changed quite a bit, mostly because we moved a lot. At least that's what I thought at the time. I don't know. But and I went from that environment and then they rejected me. And then when I found Landmark, I found like what I thought was acceptance. And it was to an extent. It didn't have that community, that world didn't have the rigidity. And unlike many other self-help groups like Scientology is very intolerant of the gay lifestyle, whatnot. Landmark didn't have any of that. They at least as at the participant level, because it gets different as you move into leadership. And I bet you encountered this too. But because as you move into leadership, you have to become the ideal that they're selling. You have to, your life, everything about your life has to become an expression of that ideal. And there's this little bit of this bait and switch that goes on. And I can hear it there too of we accept you. We love you. In Landmark, we would say you are whole, complete, and perfect. You just have some barriers to the expression. And if you buy our courses, we'll teach you how to move through those barriers, right?
Yes.
So that's the
Right. Exactly.
secular,
Exactly.
commercialized model, but you can hear the same things. You, in God's eyes, you are perfect, but you have these sins. You just
Yeah.
have these sins. You have these compulsions. You have these thoughts. You have these
Yes.
behaviors that are not who God really created you to be. And if
Yes.
you participate with us, then we'll help you. We'll help you. That is what indoctrination, like that is what it looks. This is the tractor. I'm doing tractor beams
Yeah.
here. If for those of you that are listening
Yeah.
on the podcast, you can't see it.
Yeah.
Go watch on YouTube. But
Yeah.
that's the thing that brings us in. And then we buy into that. So then we're like in this spin of just trying to become that. So pretty soon we're
Yes.
now trying to become the ideal. So, and one of the things I appreciate in your book, you share very openly about how you sought marriage. You know, you sought out your marriage to fulfill the image of a successful pastor, to attempt to
Yes.
curb, your homosexual tendencies, which I
Right.
appreciate what you're saying. You weren't thinking of them like that at the time. I think that's a
Nada.
really important thing
Never.
for folks to hear.
Yes. Yeah. Keep
No,
it suppressed. Keep it suppressed. And
most of all from yourself,
right.
right? Like,
Right.
yeah,
Yes. I think it's important for me to say that I was on the track of becoming a successful pastor. I could speak and had the charisma to speak. And there was, I don't know about today, but there was a suspicion of a single pastor. So I knew that if I was going to continue to be a successful pastor, I knew I needed to be married. I knew I needed to find a
yes,
wife. So
yeah.
I began to search in my own community. Saginaw, Michigan is the name of the town, a GM place that we built
And I know second.
steering gears. We were a steering gear city, about 100,000 when GM was very powerful. But I met this Catholic girl, married her, and again, in the thought, not only to become a successful pastor, but in the thought, I hope and pray that this marriage takes away some of these homosexual urges. That
Yes.
perhaps, that my real problem is if I learn to have heterosexual sex, maybe the homosexual sexual will begin to fade away and I will live my life. So it was kind of a great way for me to think about that. So I was married. We went on to Philadelphia, to school in Philadelphia, got a degree in sociology, and then 2 years later, I went on to seminary in Philadelphia and got my master's of divinity. All the time looking for becoming a successful pastor. All the time. Now I'm in my late 20s, thinking again the question: when did you know you were gay? I still haven't answered that. Still
Mhm.
in my head. No, I'm married now. Of course, for those that are curious, only the curious, okay, you can turn your microphones off or earphones off. Sexual sex was just not fulfilling at all for my ex. I don't like to call her my ex. It's my son's mother. And I don't want to mention her name, but I
Well, it's
think it
very
was,
clear from your book that you love this woman very much.
I did,
To this day, it's very
I do
clear
still.
that she's, yeah.
The end of the story is today she's very angry. And so a lot of people question, what's your relationship now with your wife and your kids? And I have to say they have no contact. I did not exist. I do not exist. When we on the divorce, she told the judge, she says, the only thing I wish is that he gets sick and dies or, that his life ends soon so I can just put all of this nightmare behind me. So she wishes I was dead. So I know that kind of influence with my two grown sons is still effective. So no, we don't have any contact at all. So we were married. I got my degree in sociology and in theology. All of my theology was directed towards straight, non-homosexual theology.
Well, again, in those religious structures and organizations, homosexuality it's a choice. It's not, it would be like saying we don't have arms. We don't have, and one of the things it's interesting you have a degree in sociology, so I'm sure you can relate to this, but one of the things that we have as human beings, and it's both a miracle and a curse, but we actually have the ability to mentally construct and live a reality and live in that reality.
Yeah.
But it requires reinforcement. It requires agreement. It requires a certain amount of structure. And that's what these communities become.
Right.
These communities become this support structure for an identity.
Yes.
And the identity has got all kinds of rules. It is this way. It isn't that other way. It's unfortunate as much progress as we've made in understanding human sexuality and how diverse it is and how it's just so much bigger and wider than what we've tried to make it in these systems. But what I'm curious about is the systems. What is it that's really trying to be won there? I mean, I keep coming up with it's the we're better than them. Like it creates an us and themness, which gives a hierarchy, which gives power. Near as I can tell, so, and that happens even in the personal development. My personal development was better than yours. Sarah Edmondson and a little bit culty has become a friend, and her husband are big Nexium whistleblowers. And there's this really funny byplay between Nexium and Landmark, and she like, because we had offices in the same area and we're competing for the same clients and same customers, just like church. Baptist is better than Pentecostal is better than,
I mean,
this.
I think religious people live on the fact that I am a sinner. I do fall short of the glory of God. That's what I hear all the time. But your sin, homosexuality, so there's a hierarchy of
So
sin.
your sin is more than my sin?
Yeah.
Got it.
I
Okay,
think
great.
that's so true. Sexual sins are much more serious and much more demanding than being obese or
Why do you
telling
think that is?
telling a
Do you
lie.
have a,
Yeah, see, now
you have a theory about why?
there's that hierarchy. Like very large pastors, obese pastors, would be pointing their finger to homosexuals. Telling how sinful they are for their homosexual sin, and they should know the Bible. That's the other part. You should know your Bible. Well, they also have a hierarchy of what they accept as scriptures. Some of the scriptures they don't care to talk about, like feeding the poor or taking care of people who need food or clothing or in prison. Those kinds of sins.
Well, and even that behavior on the dark side. So there's a light side. My husband and we were managing a hotel in downtown Dallas at the time of the Katrina evacuation, and it became dubbed Hotel Katrina. It was one of the most miraculous and incredible experiences of my life. I personally witnessed the incredible beauty of human beings amongst some of the most devastating of times, which is those go
Right.
together a lot. It's the contrast. That's why I like Confronting the Line, because it's the contrast that lets us see.
Right.
So there's the side of that that's like incredible. And we fed and housed and cared for and rehomed hundreds of families. And we did that because the churches, it was actually, FEMA did a certain level of support. I am a fan of FEMA, but it was the churches. And interestingly enough, First Baptist of Dallas, one of the pastors there, this incredible man, he's not part of that church anymore, but still, I'm sure an incredible pastor, Scott Ward. He came, and literally one of those pastors was standing on either side of my husband and I for 5.5 weeks. And if we said, "Oh, we're running out of toilet paper," boom, within a couple of hours, toilet paper would be coming in, because they would put out in the network, we need, the Quality Inn, downtown Dallas Market Center needs toilet paper, and toilet paper would come in mass. Oh, they need baby equipment. And it wasn't just them. There was the Highland Park Presbyterian. There was a number of them. And what I saw in that experience is, in the United States, who fills in the gap or used to, I think right now it's in a bad place, but at that time, who fills in the gap between where our social services, which are terrible in the United States, social services that our government does not provide, social support and so on, who fills in the gap is the churches. That's who they rely on. That's supposedly what the tax exemption's about. So that whole piece, but there's a dark side. The other side of the line is the righteousness, the I know better, am better than you, that comes with that help. Ooh, I have the resources to give the toilet paper, so I'm just a little bit better than you. And we don't, even those of us that are giving at the time we're giving, most of us don't have the courage until something like that happens to realize our own privilege, to realize our own righteousness, to realize our own sort of hierarchical bent. Like,
Sure.
oh God, thank God I'm on the side that can help rather than the side that needs help, right? Like, so that gets corrosive in its own way. I'm a massive, you live in Brazil now. I've done a lot of work in Haiti and whatnot, and I'm actually very adamantly opposed to the whole missionary world, because it's ultimately very undermining. They're not all bad. They're great people trying to do great work. It's not about that. It's that in order for me to maintain my image as a good person and a helper, I gotta have my foot on the neck of other people societally so that I can maintain that image. So it's a catch-22.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
I think for me, the whole time in Philadelphia and when I graduated and started my own pastoring in Colorado as my first church, the culture in the United States began to shift. Talk shows had a gay guy talking about his marriage to a straight woman. And so all of this began to shift on me. And so what was solid for me now has become kind of a sinking sand as the
Oh,
culture,
that's
the whole culture changed. The whole culture was,
like, we just touched on another really key thing that gets us entrapped in high control, manipulative environments, which is certainty. We'll give up a lot of freedom for certainty as human beings because the brain sees certainty as safety. So we'll compromise a lot to have that certainty, which to me, that's ultimately what being a part of a group, the certainty, the rules, then I don't have to do the hard work of figuring out, wait, who am I? What do I like? What am I supposed to, I've got a nice clean script here, but that's interesting. And So
Well,
then the culture starts to shift and starts to undermine that.
exactly. I was
Wow.
coming out of the shower and I was watching TV and they were talking about Barry Manilow and Barry Manilow becoming gay. And I went, what? Barry Manilow is gay? I went, you gotta be kidding. It was just like personalities started having more courage. I'm not talking about Liberace because everybody, I grew up with
Yeah.
Liberace. I mean, he was flamboyant, but I'm talking about solid people that we all kind of looked up to, sports figures, singers, actors. But that whole time, back to my own life, my wife and I, we didn't sit down on the couch and talk about gayness or homosexuals or did you hear about Barry Manilow or none of that is just so taboo. It was like we placed an elephant in our marriage and it stayed there. I mean, no questions. We walked
Wow.
around it, we smelled it, we could feel it. There's sometimes tension that would grow. The whole time we're not having any sexual relationship at all. None. First year, second year, 5 years, 10 years into marriage, still nada, 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 nada. And I'm still struggling with um, when did you know you were gay?
Yeah.
Still struggling with that question. And now in my 30s. And
Yeah.
she says, I would really like to have children one of these days. We've spent 10 years in Colorado skiing and playing, and church people were our friends. And, we were couples all together, and pizza and beer and things like that. But now we're kind of changing the subject, which required that we would have more sex, that we would try to have a child. That
Mm.
that brought more tension. When did you know you were gay? Still haven't answered that question.
Yeah.
Still haven't even room.
Not even really, you're talking about it now, but it sounds like then you're not really even thinking about it in that way.
Well, I'm thinking about it all the time. All the
Oh,
time.
you are? Okay.
I'm obsessed with it. But yeah,
Really?
daily. Because
So you're
as
like wondering if you're gay or not, kind of? Trying to
yeah,
get how it occurred for you.
and I'm sure she saw when we were out to dinner, I would be looking at some guy.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure she saw that. Like, why is he staring at the waiter?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I was dealing with these urges
Uh-huh.
that
Gotcha.
were with me 24/7, all the time. Yeah, it was tough.
So there was, I think this is a good point to fit it in, and we'll pick up the story, the lineage. So your evangelical theory dictated that God could not create gay people. We kind of keep talking about that. Like, that's not a thing. It doesn't, yeah.
Signed, sealed, and
And society is also supporting that somewhat. I mean, there's a lot of, what comes first, the religious, doctrine and society, or society, they go together, right? But can you describe the theological study and realization specifically regarding the historical and cultural context of scripture?
the divorce came first. I'll just tell you the part of the story is that we had, after 2 children, we lived in Spokane, Washington. I knew that this was my last church. Some reason I just knew it. So I began to go back to school and think about becoming a teacher. And we lived in the same house, but we didn't live in the same bedroom. And I remember one day she coming down the stairs and she said,
Aha. So she says it. You don't. Yeah. Gotcha.
I
So it
don't.
wasn't like,
And so I tell all my gay friends, I didn't even have the courage to say, by the way, I'm gay. Never, never. So I
yeah.
still haven't answered the question, how long have you known you were gay?
Gotcha. So let's go back to the kids. Now you're going to, because you can hear too, you're going to get married, and you're doing the things you're supposed to do. You're doing
and I was
all of the things
a
that
good father, a good pastor, very successful pastor, growing churches, growing staff, doing everything well. We lived in California during the earthquake, and then we decided we were going to move to something a little more stable. The church in the Bay Area was less than an hour from San Francisco.
As a pastor, did you ever have anybody in your congregation come to you that was wrestling with the same things?
all the time.
Really? What was
I
that
need
like?
to confess to you that I was not on the side of the gay people the whole church work. My church,
No, you couldn't
oh,
be.
no, 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 no. I preached messages about the meaning of marriage. I preached messages about the sin of homosexuality. I did it all,
Wow.
to let the congregation know that homosexuality is not welcomed in this church. It is not something that we want to deal with. We don't have the energy or the time to begin to think about being an opening and affirming church. So let's deal with hunger. Let's deal with social issues. But homosexuality, no, no. I'm sure.
That's a good point too, where that's something I've seen in my own single, where our helping that it kind of, while it is good and it's doing good, it's also acting as a cover, a kind of beard, as it were. The old term, like you're married as
Exactly,
a beard to hide,
exactly. And I think
right?
I think
Fence.
that's the clue. That's the clue for why people are so involved in the church.
Mm,
It is a cover.
yeah.
It is part of a disease. We rarely can go to a church and begin to talk about our problems and issues. We have to keep it covered a little bit, protect it.
Mm.
We become good Christians. We become good conversational. But no, we don't really deal with our inner issues that are eating our heart and our minds. And so I think that's the issue of why people get involved in church full.
That's interesting. I've seen a version of that in the self-help community, which I kind of consider as like one step out of the church, but still very suppressive in a way that it doesn't understand about itself. I've talked to so many people now in the last couple of years who participated in transformation, in creating themselves as a possibility and bringing that possibility into existence. This is the kind of language of
Yeah,
that world. But anything deeply emotional, traumatic, like a lot of the deep stuff would get very quickly bypassed.
right.
So it could be handled mostly because it could be handled in a weekend. It could be happened in a seminar session. It could be
Yeah,
handled in distinguishing where I've been inauthentic, where I can't even
yeah.
say it right anymore, thank goodness. But and then boom, I would be transformed and suddenly I wouldn't be that anymore. I wouldn't be conflicted. I wouldn't be, it's the same kind of thinking, always reaching for the ideal rather than dealing with this is the ideal. I came out of the womb as the
Yeah,
ideal.
I think church people, when they come, when you're in the church and people begin to speak about their problems, you quickly refer them to the guy with the degree, the pastor. I mean,
We
yeah,
bypass that. We're like, no, no, no. Well, yeah, maybe you need a therapist,
yeah, maybe
but if you do the next course, you can get at it a lot faster. Therapy takes a long,
therapy takes a long time. Yeah, and
but
I
the
went,
bypassing,
and I,
we want to bypass.
and I try to write in the book kindly, but I know I wasn't too kind. That all the therapists I went to after the divorce was just really not helpful. They just
Saw
wrote
that.
they wrote prescriptions. They wrote prescriptions. So I was like, I probably had 5 different kinds of psychotic medicines that was supposed to take me and kind of one guy says, take the edge off. And I mean, I was weepy. I was a zombie. I don't know how I even exist, how I drove my car, and some to put me to sleep, some to wake me up in the morning, and all of that. I finally found an older woman in Spokane who sipped her tea and she just listened. And I said, well, are you going to write me prescriptions? She said, no, I don't do that. And I went, thank God.
Nice.
So yeah, and she was kind of a listener. So I was addicted to her. I mean, I like dumped everybody and just went to her full time.
Well, after all those years of having to deny, and I love that you became a leader, like that you became a leader in the system. Like you went all the way to try and cure what was wrong with you. So
Yes.
you become a pastor, you get married to, the right woman, a good Christian woman. And then the children. So you have children. Anything else you want to add about that? So you have, because I know you have two wonderful boys.
2 wonderful boys grown up. Both of them are school teachers. Yeah. I went to all of they were your typical males. They did all the sports that you could possibly do in school. Scott, my youngest, when all of this hit the fan and the elephant was like stabbed in the living room, Spokane became kind of a rumor mill.
This
And
is a small town. I'm from Seattle and
yeah,
did Spokane, so
so one of the teachers, of course, I was a teacher also. One of the teachers told a high school teacher, and they went, "Wow, some guy in the middle school is getting a divorce because he's gay." And they went, "What? What's his name?" So the name got out, and Scott was in that school. So he told me right out, he goes, "Dad, I'd appreciate if you not come to any of my games. People know you. Your story is out there. And so there'd be a couple times I'd go to his basketball games and I would stand near the bleachers so no one, it was tough. It was tough on them. It was
so
tough.
they were, how old were they when, and your
Gee, I don't know.
wife is the one who actually, but it sounds like high school and middle school,
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah, no, they were in high school. Kyle, my oldest, went on to college and got his teaching degree. And so he was older than Scott, and Scott was still in high school.
So Scott was when I love the elephant got stabbed in the
Yeah.
living room, which wife does, what do you think precipitated that? Like, did she, I mean, that took a lot of courage
I
on
don't
her.
know. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what happened to her in her mind. I think she is kind of fed up about having this stranger living in her house.
Yeah.
She a couple of days later said, "We need to find you an apartment close to where we live now so that the boys could come to visit." I don't know what she thought, that the boys were just going to come on over and have some coffee with me or drink or whatever, or watch a game. That that never happened. I mean, it just never happened. I don't know. I have no idea I just think the pressure got
Yeah.
to her at
She's
that point.
probably pretty lonely. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
just speak as a woman. She's probably pretty lonely. And look, the strength of women is highly underrated.
Yeah.
So in popular society, but I actually it was a pastor actually that puts on these fantastic marriage workshops, and he's a social Emerson
Yeah.
Eggridge, is that how you say his name? Anyway, but I'll never forget, I was in a thing with him one time, and it was a marriage thing, and he was talking about women are the leaders, men are the power. Like they're the actors, but the leadership is the women because the women know. But I'll tell you, as a woman, mostly you feel like your leadership has to be hidden. You have to
Yes.
hide it.
Right.
So, and to me, calling an elephant is an act of enormous courage and incredible leadership.
Yeah. And
And
she said, which is pitiful for me. She says, "How long have you known you were gay?" And I looked at her straight right off the bat and saying, "I'm not gay. Gay means happy. And I'm not happy." And she just kind of went, "Oh my God, you need some help. You really do need to find some help because I can't."
wow,
And then she says, "I can't deal with this anymore.
yeah.
I can't be married."
Wow. So that's where I often joke about, I got separated from my sort of high control environment, my world, the self-help world. I often call it ejected from the spaceship. First, you just feel ejected. You don't realize for a while that it
Right.
was a spaceship,
Right.
but you're kind of out in space with nobody and nothing, and including yourself, because yourself has been so commingled with the doctrine, with
Right.
the ideology, with the teachings. And it's
Yes.
no different, guys, in a self-help group. It's
Yep.
no different. My job as a teacher was to be the work, to
Yes.
be the distinction. And and
Yeah.
I still actually love the work, which you and I will come to that, because
Right.
you know, people don't realize is leaving, you don't actually have to give that. You have to give it up for a little while, because you have to
Yes.
separate so you can see. But you can come back to the parts that
Right.
nurtured you.
Yeah.
But you don't know that at that time.
Right.
You're losing everything. So you're
Yeah.
losing your family, you're losing your congregation. I can't remember at this point, because I know you left being a pastor
Yeah,
and
I
became
did. I left the church and became a middle school teacher. Anyways, and I went to school every day in that kind of state that you just described. And I had a good friend across the hall, and Marcia said to me, "Well, you can't get a divorce. You got to go. You got to get some therapy. Maybe you two should go to therapy." And I said, "Marcia, I think I'm gay." And she looked
Mm,
at me like, and I went, Did I just say that?
I was going to say, was that the first time you
I
said
think I
that?
just said that. I think I just said that out loud. My goodness. And she looked at me and she went, "What? You?" And I went, "Yeah." And she's, "Well, all of my friends are gay." And I went, "Oh, well, good for you. I'm glad. I'm happy for
Because
you."
now, like you said, society around has started to change. Like we've started
Exactly.
to accept that
Exactly.
gay is human.
Yes, exactly. So that's probably to answer the question for everybody. That's the day after many months of drugs and therapy, and I came to terms with the word gay, and then began therapy with this therapist and exploring that and all of my beliefs about. And so church just went out the window. God went out the window. The whole theology went out the window. I took my books to
Yeah.
I took all of my theology books to a used bookstore and just dumped them. The guy goes, "Don't you want money for these? These are like commentaries." And I went, "No, I don't think I'm going to use those ever in my life again." And
This is such an important piece, though, that I want to underline, highlight, circle, score for anybody who's coming out of an ideology, a doctrine, a belief, and I think we have to create more room for us as human beings to change our mind. We can't evolve if we can't change our mind. If we can't go, wow, could you imagine if the doctoring still believed, it was still about humors and bleeding you to get the bad blood out without putting any new in? I mean, the population would be much less, I guess. But we have to be able to evolve. And you can't evolve if you can't separate and then deconstruct. And this is a big thing I'm on
exactly,
because I'm now deconstructing
exactly,
it's called the distinctions or the
right,
methodologies, not of transformation. Right? But this piece of deconstructing, and what I want to say to people from my perspective, and I know this is where it goes for you too, is don't worry. The good parts come back and they're even better, right? But
exactly.
you have to separate. I have many landmark friends out there they're like, okay, the organization was bad. Okay, the staff position, the leader position, it was really harmful. It really hurt. But the distinctions are good. In other words, the doctrine, the ideology is good. And they're trying to use that doctrine to heal. You can't do that. You have to separate from it and kind of pull it apart so that you can separate the chaff from the grain, quite literally.
Yes,
And I really appreciate
yeah.
what you're saying there and how important that is.
Well, the book came out, and a guy who lives in Mexico sent me. He goes, "You mind if I send you a little poem because your story is my story, except I'm a Catholic. I was a Catholic priest." And I went, "Wow, this is weird." So he told me that his family forced him to become a Catholic priest, and yet he dealt with homosexuality all his life. So he wrote a poem called "I Once Was a Liar." I once was a liar, my whole life balanced precariously on a lie. These feelings lie heavy on the frail frame of a frightened little boy. Dread wrapped my mind in chains and throw away the key to the future with my fear as the motif, with innocence as the melody. Lie first to myself, seeking acceptance and approval from all others, a search for the essential everywhere, but within, like a lost fawn from his
Mm.
mother. And he writes this poem about, I once was
Search
a,
for the essential everywhere but within. Did I hear that right?
yeah,
I think that captures a really important aspect of what you and I are learning and sharing in our own journeys is when we're looking out, we're looking to the church, we're looking to the teachings, we're looking to the transformation, we're looking to the leader, we're looking to the like whatever for ourselves.
yeah,
Ultimately, it feels to me like the real journey is going in.
yeah.
And is scary because you don't know what's in there.
And I really
And if
honestly,
what's in there conflicts with what you're supposed to do in society, that's literally
I
dangerous.
really
It's
didn't
dangerous.
know I was going to survive.
Yeah.
I mean, I was really afraid. I never cooked my own meal. I mean, all of this adult life of me, I didn't know the pots and pans I needed or the cups and the saucers. I didn't know anything about living by myself, living with myself. So all of that had to come in. This guy who wrote me this poem also said, "Are you familiar with the book of Why People Lie to Themselves?" And I went, "No." So I've been trying to Google, and if anybody out there knows this author, I'm curious why, I lied to myself because I needed protection and I had these layers. But what is that book about? Why do people lie to themselves? That's a good one. I like that.
Wow, that's good. I'm going to add that to my list. Well, and I
Yeah,
think you answered in part is it occurs for us as if our survival is dependent on it. And if
depends.
we are good people, we regard ourselves as good people. We want to be good people. We want to have to believe the lie.
Right.
We have to believe the lie. And that's where it starts is you got to be willing if true growth is what we're after. I believe we have to be willing to go
Yeah.
lying to
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Now you can go too far into that because I've done that too. One of the pieces of a human potential doctrine is 100% responsibility. You are the source of all of life. You are the source of everything. Well, that's playing off a fundamental psychological truth that we are seeing life how we're seeing life. And we as human beings, as you and I are even describing here, have the ability to have some put our will on what we're seeing and how we're seeing it, right?
Right.
Okay, but that has like very little to do with life itself. It has a lot to do with our experience of ourselves, our internal landscape. It has very little to do with life itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I
We have
agree.
to live with that ability. Oh, I have the ability to construct my reality, and there's some gifts in that, and there's some times that might be appropriate, and then there's other times, but I also have to live in the world
Yeah.
the way the world is, and I have to be able to navigate those two things.
There is, someone says, what about now? And you're married, but Brazilian, and things are paradise here. But there, there are many times at night before I go to sleep that I grieve about
Mm.
my past life. I know that there's not wholeness when I think about the past. There's not peace. There's really not very much good to begin to think about it. But as I lay down my head, I think, wow, you lied to your wife, you lied to your sons, you lied to your church, you lied to your friends, that's tough to live with. I just had open heart surgery a year ago in September, and the surgeon who speaks total English, he goes, what would you say is your stress level right now? I love Brazil. I love the beach. I love. He goes, well, what are you dealing with? And I'm going, okay, you would have to put your finger on that one. But yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one for me is to think about your mistakes. But theology and good philosophy maybe is the Apostle Paul who says, I forget what lies behind and press forward. Back here, I, I can't I can't do this. I can't do this without the grace. But now I have to press on, move on, and continue on, even though I don't have a relationship with my sons and my
Well,
wife.
I would offer it comes through in your book, and I think it's slowly coming through in your consciousness. But in your book, I could see your willingness to hear that question when you lay your head down on the pillow. That's what healing looks like in
Yeah,
my world.
yeah,
Is going, wow, look at that. And then it's all about everybody talks about forgiveness, but they got it wrong. It's not about forgiving the church, no, it's about forgiving yourself.
yes,
True peace comes in.
yeah,
And I can see where we've created these doctrines, these
you're right.
theologies to try and speak to some of this, but we externalize it. I was watching a great Tyler Perry movie the other day. It's up
Huh,
on Netflix, right? And I have a complicated relationship with the whole Jesus God thing. And but I realized I was kind of annoyed by all the God reference. And then I realized this is how I thought of it. You'll laugh. See, I'll try my theory out. The the icon of God is like a giant gestalt exercise. We're actually talking to ourselves, but we kind of put it out here for a minute. We go, okay, God, can you please forgive me? And that's fine to ask God's forgiveness. I've asked God's forgiveness, but ultimately the forgiveness that mattered was when I looked in the mirror and I went, man, can you forgive yourself? Can you forgive yourself for getting pregnant at 15? That was my big, wasn't my first sin, but that was the big one.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and especially being in a Christian world, like I had defied the whole thing. So, and then over time, yeah, but it doesn't, And when I knew I had truly forgiven myself is when I can talk about, like, you know what, that was not really a good idea. Like, I do not recommend that lifestyle. And I actually became somebody who talked in high schools. Like, I was featured
Right.
in an after school special. But what I would talk about was the realities of what it meant to be a parent at 16 years old, 17 years old, to not be able to go to school, to have to
Right.
rely on blah, blah, blah. And a way to talk about the reality of it. But over time, my son is 40 now. I love him to death. We did a great job raising each other. Um, we raised each other. We grew up together, and I wouldn't trade him for the world. And if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't have gotten pregnant. Like, we have to be able to hold both those things. That's what forgiveness allows. I believe, is
Exactly.
forgiveness allows my ability to go, well, that was bonehead.
Yeah.
Or, oh, that cost me. One of the things that cost me spending almost 30 years of my prime adult life in this particular organization, and, I was sort of a pastor, as it were, but in a secular seminar company. I got to travel the world. I have an amazing community of people. There's enormous blessings. And I didn't do the trauma recovery work I'm doing now. It's having a deep spiritual, emotional healing impact. I stunted my professional development and growth. I missed the opportunity. I just got presented a potential opportunity to go back to school, but I didn't get to go back to, I didn't go to school. I don't have a retirement. I don't, there's all
Yeah.
these impacts. And okay. And that's what I appreciated about your book. It's
Yeah.
really clear that you're doing that work. And I appreciate how you're describing it. It kind of sneaks in on you.
You
But
know,
what's
one of
you're not staying
one
away
of the chapters in the book is called The Ripple Effect, which isn't something I don't know where that
from it.
title came from. But now I really don't tolerate lying too much. I don't
Yeah.
in myself and with others. And of course my husband is kind of like, I say, no, don't lie to me. And he goes, oh, I hate that when you say that. But I don't like lying. And sometimes I'll do a fib when I'm at the store and I'll think, I need to just tell her the truth. I'll catch myself. I'll catch myself. That's the beginning book that I read in the beginning of this process was called The Unlearning, and
Yeah. I love
unlearning
that.
unlearning to tell the truth. And some people say, well, you're supposed to tell the truth. Well,
Which truth?
my lifestyle was not telling the truth. It was about secrets. It was about secrets. And now I have a hard time with people who have a hard time telling the truth. Just tell me the truth. I sent my book to my cousin in Michigan, and it was a couple months. It was been a couple months since I heard from him. So I texted him on Facebook and I says, "Okay, stop this. I know you've read the book. What do you think?" He goes, "Oh, it's a good book." I said, "Stop. Tell me the truth." And he goes, "Well, I just didn't enjoy it. I did." Oh, he goes, it was a sad book. It was a tough book for me. He goes, "I see you with your wife, and it was hard for me to separate
Yeah.
you from your wife as a couple. I see you as a
Mhm.
couple still."
Yeah.
And reading this book shattered all of that. And I wonder, like, why would you write a book like this? So I have a really intolerance now. And I have an intolerance in a country in which gayness, I mean, they are kind of far ahead of the United States, but there are so many gay guys that I'm with that are hiding from their evangelic family. It's ask, don't tell kind of life
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Brazil. We know our son is gay, but we don't want to talk about it.
Right.
We don't want to celebrate it. We don't want to ask him to bring his boyfriend home or anything like. So that's very common, and it gets me all twisted inside. And I have to say, okay, calm, my word in
I think
Portuguese.
it's so fundamentally threatening. I have a number of friends. One of my best friends is a gay man. And it's never, I was like, so, what? I would come to realize later when I saw the movie about Tammy Faye, and I was very, sad about not being able to, just sort of what's happened in the church and stuff.
Yeah,
When I saw the movie, I was like, oh, I get it. The Christianity I learned was the Tammy Faye version, which
yeah,
beginning and middle of end is Jesus loves you, don't you know? Like,
yeah.
that's it. Right. So I don't really understand what the threat is. The only thing I can think of is we're just so biologically ingrained to reproduce, and you can't although now you can, science has made it possible. When I was on a 2-week tour in Africa, and gay marriage had just been legalized in the United States. And we were sitting around the tables one night, and one of the other gals in my group was talking with the guides. And, we'd sit up until late in the night and just have all these conversations about all the culture and the differences and all this and that. And this conversation came up about gay marriage, and the two guides that were with us the whole 2-3 weeks was like, but we don't get it because you can't have children. Like, that's all it was to them. If I was born and I never had a right arm, I wouldn't live like I needed a right arm because I don't have it like that. So to me, it's like that. I'm not gay, so I couldn't ever really know what that is for me.
Yeah.
And we can't ever really.
It's my own prejudice. I live in a big city, João Pessoa, which is the capital of our little state called Paraíba. And these two guys I met in a grocery store, and they were American. They spoke English, and we were talking about cheddar cheese, and they said, that's not cheddar cheese. And I went, wow, you guys speak English. And he goes, well, because we're American. And I went, wow, cool. And of course, they were a couple. And I got to know them, and they had a deep need to have children. And I was kind of like, I don't get it. Like, you're two great guys in Brazil. It's a great playground. You could have fun with your gay life, blah, 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 in my head. But no. They saved their money, and they got a surrogate, and the surrogate had twins. So now they're parents, and I still don't get it, but that's okay because I was a parent.
Yeah, but you know what? Because you are a parent.
Yeah.
That's part of why I think you can't get it. I remember having a good friend of mine who went through to hell and back to give birth to a baby. And I kept saying to her, just adopt. There's so many kids that need, and she goes, no, I want to have the experience of being pregnant. Now, I've been pregnant twice, of 2 children, and gone through childbirth twice. And I was like, no, it's really not that great. It's just really not that great. Like, you don't understand. Like, you have heartburn all the time and hurt. Look at these stretch marks, all this stuff. But then I came to realize, like, okay, wait, but I could never really understand because I had the experience. That's the privilege that I've had.
Yes.
And that's kind of how it works, right? And then we also, we have kids, and we know, like, we love them to death, but aren't they kind of awful? Like, they're kind of awful sometimes too, right? They're mean. They're, they grow up into these humans that maybe we like and don't. We love. We always love. But we don't necessarily like. And I have 2 stepchildren, and we have all kinds of strife in our family. Also, interestingly, around some of the religious things.
Yeah. Brazil is a strong Catholic area.
Yeah.
And they went to a hospital, and they had a hard time because, when they filled out the documents, who's the mother?
Right.
And these guys could speak fluent Portuguese. We both want our names on the birth.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. It hit the fan for a couple of days. And then they decided, well, okay, I guess we could do that because the surrogate, I don't know what happened to, I never got the story about what happened to the surrogate, but they had twins. Yeah, that's the chapter. That's the chapter about the ripple effect. I have intolerance for people who are hiding in secret of their life. I mean, I can't hide. I got blue eyes. I can't hide that.
It's interesting you state it as a kind of intolerance. I would reframe it a little bit in that you've come out and you're okay.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a kind of a cranky expression of what's actually probably really your just deep love for people, and you want them to know they're okay. They don't have to hide that they have blue eyes. They don't have to hide. Like, so then we have kind of a cranky affect about it. But no, I wouldn't. You wrote a book to shout from the rooftops. It's okay. It turns out it's really hard.
Yeah. The ripple effect. If someone says, well, did your boys get the book? And I went, I have no idea. If they got the book. I'm sure when and if they get the book and they read it, that I'm going to hear about it. But our lives.
Maybe not. It might be interesting because I bet there's boys are pretty wired to take care of their mom.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then all the wiring of the church, right?
Yeah.
So I have two other things I wanna ask you about before we wrap
Okay.
up. So one was, what was it like you describe it in the book, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to just talk a little bit about what was it like to meet your now husband and fall in love in an authentic way?
That's typical gay life right now. Most gay guys find their love of their life online. And
Mhm.
I was an English teacher. He was an English teacher. And we met on an English teacher's site. I don't know what it was called. And so his agenda was to practice his English with an American. And so we, as time went on, almost every other day, we talked, just talked about everything, our lives and where we're at and what we're doing. Brazil culture, totally absent for me. I had no idea what he was involved with, the life of a Brazilian in though back then. And as time went on, he taught me that love is this process. It's a growing plant. It becomes as that old children's story. By then, all your fur is rubbed off and your eyes are falling out, and you have droopy, that velveteen rabbit, And as that's
Yeah.
kind of like how love is, it kind of grows. And I said, "Have you ever thought about coming to the United States?" Left the English lessons kind of phase and became more and more and more intertwined. We tried desperately to get him to the United States. Wasn't going to happen with visas. Couldn't do it
Yeah.
on a visitor visa. He was rejected twice by the American government. And then it was
Wow.
that historic event where the Supreme Court said, okay, gay marriage is now a marriage.
Yeah.
That was the door. That was the window that flew open. I hired an attorney in New York City who handled this, and I says, I don't know if this is going to work. 3 strikes, you're out. He can never come to the United States. So he goes, no, no, this is it. It's legal. So we put a big book together of photos and everything, how we met. And yeah, it was accepted. He had to go to Rio de Janeiro, which is about 4 hours from his house, to fly down, do a actual interview in English. And one of the questions was, what is Ken's birthday? Do you know Ken's birthday? And he goes, yeah, it's February 12th, And the guy goes, wow, what do you think? They were asking him personal questions about me.
Okay.
I was proud that he actually knew those kinds of answers for them. So they went, okay, you're approved. Enjoy your marriage and life in the United States. So he came to Spokane and lived for 7 years, 6 years. And I went, okay, I'm done teaching. I'm getting tired. I want to go. I want to go to Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
I can get it. I wanted to speak to and say something for those of you that are listening. It takes a lot of courage to allow your family to be upset at you. It actually takes a lot of courage, and to allow them their process and to
Exactly.
just love them exactly as they are, even when they're not willing to love you
Yeah,
exactly as you are.
exactly. That's key. That's key. Amen. We say amen to you. Yeah.
Well, and that's so in the end of your book, and this is where, again, the dark side, the light side, right? Like of the line. You talk a little bit about, and you just expressed it a little bit, your tolerance for intolerance, wearing thin. You kind of talk a bit about coming back around to what in the church is often called a relationship with Christ, a relationship with you. Like
Yeah.
you came to a place where you can both be gay and be Christian,
Yeah.
in its true sense. Can you say
Exactly.
a little about
Yeah,
that?
that's important. Thank you for adding that. I'm not a big church goer. The guy who cuts my hair the other day, he goes, "Well, don't you go to church?" And I said, "Nah." First of all, it's in Portuguese, and I'm not gonna do that. I do miss the community. I miss the
Yeah.
singing. I miss the atmosphere.
It was always about the music for me.
Yeah,
I
I
I haven't been to church in a long time, but when we moved here to Texas and I would go, I would
I love
basically go
that.
for.
I guess what I miss and what I'm craving now is that this presence of a higher power. I'm in the presence. I don't want to say Jesus or God or when I just think that when I'm there and I see in Venetia's, my partner's church, which is Catholic, I go and there's this pomp and circumstance and incense and bells and whistles and
Ritual.
everything, rituals. total rituals. And I think, what is this? What is this show? But then I think there's this presence. There's this awesome presence of
Mm,
someone bigger than me. Right now, it's the ocean.
mhm.
The amazing power and beauty and expanse of this body of water could toss my body around, and I could smell the salt and feel the ocean bob me around like I'm nothing. So there's an also a daily reminder. Maybe that's my church now. As
Yeah.
I walk to the beach every day. I pick up shells. I feel the sand, the warm sand. But then I get in the water. I try to figure out what's way out there. I wonder what that is over there. Because we're close to Africa. They say if we continue in a boat, we would catch the coast of Africa. And I think, wow, the ocean is so above me. It is so
Yeah.
beyond me. It has life.
Where I can, it's like your heart opens, that's presence to me. I participate in a spiritual study path called the Diamond Approach. What I love about it is they pull from spiritual traditions of all kinds. And we can be in a retreat, we can be looking at stuff from St. John the Baptist, the Enneagram, and Buddhism and
Yeah.
Sufism all at once,
Yeah.
so I love it. But there is this sense of presence that I think is not bound by the skin bags,
Yeah.
that we can participate in if we do the work, the healing, the looking, the authentic work, and that we open our hearts
Yeah.
and we allow, I mean, to me, that was always it. And, that's one of the things about, I've always thought the church itself, the institution
Yeah.
wasn't about the institution. It was about access to
Yeah.
something. So what I've come to believe is it's access to the presence of love of and humanity is
Yeah.
an expression of love. So can I open myself? My ongoing inquiry for the last 5 years, Ken, has been, can I live in the world the way it is with my heart open? And
Exactly.
it's a daily, some days I can't.
Yeah.
I just can't, and some days I can, and mostly I'm in the journey to find out what does that even mean, and what do I have to let go of, and
Right.
what do I have to pay attention to.
Brazilians on New Year's Eve, I always like to go down to the beach on New Year's Eve because there's millions of people down there. Women, particularly, I should say women, but all Brazilians wear some kind of white
Uh-huh.
dresses,
Yeah.
formal white dresses. So it's 11:59 and they all move towards the water. They go right in the
Mhm.
water. And when it becomes 12 o'clock, like it's church, they all just like go under the water and pour this water over their heads, as this
Oh, isn't it?
cleansing. And I think, wow, I am missing so much by being like rigid evangelical, there's something going.
Well, it takes time to shed that. I'm in my own deconstruction process a lot of times, I'm like, "Wait," like the chip I've been working on this week that I swear got implanted was that there is no gain without pain. Like, well, really? No, maybe can I gain from my joy? Yeah,
Exactly.
when I look, I actually can, but I have to bring that into my awareness because
Exactly.
that's not the programming. The
Right.
programming says, no, 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 you got to have the
Yeah.
pain. So if I want gain, I got to go look for pain.
Yep.
Well, maybe I don't. So, wow. Well, Ken, I
Oh,
so appreciate this time together. I
this was
suspect it won't
this
be
was
the last.
amazing. Good.
I enjoyed your book very much, and we'll put a link
Good.
to the
Good.
book. And I saw on Amazon you have a little workbook too that
Yeah, I
when I
do.
looked.
Somebody said, "Well, I'd like to do some of the work that you did, theologically or psychologically." Well, I could put some of the questions that I would come
Yeah,
up with,
you're a pastor and a teacher.
Yeah,
You got the skill.
exactly. I did that. So, but nobody's really thought that was important. But my email, I make sure one podcast guy says, "What's your email so people can be in touch with you?" And yeah, I want people to be in touch with me. So that's also in that link that you could provide for them too.
Okay, great.
Good.
I'll make sure to get all that from you and
This
put it in the
this was
show notes.
this was wonderful. I'm feeling like
Yeah.
I did the book kind of roundabout everywhere. It was kind of fun for me. Good.
Well, I was really excited to. I've wanted to, I don't want my channel to be the landmark channel. Like I don't while I have to deal with the 30 years of my experiences in that group and that organization, and of course I'm going to, continue to draw on that experience. But the phenomenon, the lessons that I've been getting as I deconstruct, I'm seeing them everywhere. I'm seeing them in our
Yeah.
politics. I'm seeing in our church, I saw how even my own church experience made me very susceptible to the landmark group. And that wasn't necessarily a
Yeah.
bad thing.
Yeah.
I'm not even,
Yeah.
but I think that we can see all this, and I think
Yeah.
it's important that we see it in the times we're living in right now, because there's a lot that's wanting to happen. We
Yeah.
got some big jobs to do
Yeah.
to
We
take care
do.
of ourselves and
Yeah.
our planet and each other.
I would say to all of my LGBT group people that are listening today, back to the words of that pastor. It does get better. It does get better.
Mhm.
Life is so amazing for me right now.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm really glad. And I'm glad that your wife had the courage to call it out and you had the
Exactly.
courage to step into the space she created. So, and I'll hope and pray and send love and light and all the things that your sons will find their way to the
Yes,
love that you
exactly.
have for them.
I have two
Yeah.
I have two beautiful grandkids, and I
Mm.
live their lives, or I see their lives through media postings, which is kind of sad. I kind of like, oh, Charlie lost a tooth today, and I'm thinking, wow, I wish I was there. I wish I could kind
Yeah.
of be with Charlie. So
Yeah.
it's kind of,
I
well,
hear you.
all right. Thank you
That's
so
good to know.
much.
Thank you. More to come.
Yep. Ciao, ciao.